that a hero lies in you.
I decided to take this day to share a story about me, and a lot of you have heard bits and pieces of it, and the connection with mothers in the Middle East. But you should know by now that every time I come, you're going to get a history lesson. Unity needs a minister of social justice. Deanne, that's what we need. So for those of you who thought that Mother's Day has always been around, it hasn't. And in the United States, it started in 1907 with a woman named Anna Jarvis. She was an Appalachian woman in Philadelphia, and her mother used to do a lot of social justice things, and in honor of her mother when she passed away, she decided to organize Mother's Day work groups. And I think so connected to women and women who do things of strength, and people of various genders who do things of strength. It wasn't a day to bring flowers and chocolate and candy to mothers. She actually created it as a day to do the things that women felt needed to be done in the world, and that they were going to claim the ability to have the strength to be able to do that. And so the first thing that she started with was trying to lower the infant mortality rate. And so that was the first Mother's Day in the United States, of women coming together, and she started to teach them about health measures, how to keep themselves healthy, how to keep their children healthy. So they were political, social days of action. And then there was this other group of people, this duo, who decided to do some of that same kind of work, Mary Towell Sassine and Frank Herring, who organized a Mother's Day in the late 19th and early 20th century. But as was the case in society often, one person was woman-identified and the other person was male-identified, and so they turned the day into a day that was connected to men rather than women. And so it became a day in which they honored men's accomplishments, and they connected that with the fact that they got born by a woman. And so, and then they started to call Frank Herring the father of Mother's Day. And so Anna Jarvis then started to organize and campaign against that because she didn't like the fact that they were just using women as a vessel, and that was the only thing. But way before that, in the UK, there was something that was called Mothering Day. That's actually the very first day, and that's why you've been hearing it being said around today. Mothering Day had nothing to do with women. It had to do with the church. It was the mother church. And so on Mothering Day, it was the day that if you were a part of a relatively small community, but you had a mother denomination, it was the day that you would pilgrimage to that denomination. So it would be like us going to Unity Village. And you would go and you would listen to talks and you would help out, and there would be professional development kinds of things to help you be a better person, and you would support your denomination that way. If you were a part of a very small church, then it would be that church community that you would go, you would help garden, you would do things for, you would come to know community that you hadn't really come to know before. And that's what the day was. And so there would be bulletins out for people about Mothering Day and what you were going to do at your church or within your mother church community. And then shortly after that, people who had servants were encouraged to give that day to their servants because servants usually work 24/7. And so that day, people who had servants would then stay home and take care of their own stuff. And they would allow their servants to go and do that pilgrimage with their families because it was the only opportunity that their families really had most of the time to be together, to not have to work. And they would do spiritual things together within their church communities or the mother church. And so that's actually the origin. That's where it came from. And then eventually became a lot more about flowers and chocolate. But I think that now we're growing into a new understanding of mothering. And so I want you to just stay with me for a little bit. There is a definition of mothering: to give birth to give rise to produce. And I love that. Give rise to cause to happen, to partner with, to be a co-creator with. Can you think of anything that you've ever been a co-creator with or that you've put together with someone else? I think about Hamilton Montessori School. And there was a lot that I did, and I have started a number of schools around the United States. There's a lot that I did around that, but what I remember is all these people. I remember Claire making little things. I said, can everybody go to yard sales and see if they could find something? And I would get a text message, we're at this yard sale and we found some plates and we found some bowls. Put your hand up if you were somebody who did some of that kind of stuff. Searching around for things in your house. That was co-creation. That was mothering. We produced Hamilton Montessori School together. We were all mothers. We were all doing mothering to make that happen. It wasn't a person. And as is indicative of mothers, we did some outrageous things. Outrageous things. I mean, we went before the council in Novato trying to convince them to give us the license because neighbors didn't want us to. We went around talking to people. We had to deal with the media because there were nasty things that were coming. Mothers will stand up and do some just outrageous things, and we do that in mothering. Regardless of what gender we are, we do that in mothering, in co-creating, and partnering, because we will move mountains to make something happen if we need to. And there you go. Support, watch, tend, pay attention to, keep an eye on, look after, nourish. Have you ever done that for someone or something? Put your hand up. And if you notice, that definition, and this one doesn't tell you that it has to be a person. This says characteristic of, not person who. It can be anyone. It can be anyone. And the educator in me really wants to find out whether this is true. But I know that I have felt like when I was mothering that I've done a good 428 different things at one time. So I'm going to tell you about a story or two that has to do with some of the things that people do around mothering. It was many, many, many years ago at the Oakland Coliseum, and my daughter Jennifer and my son Jonathan went to a concert. Their dad is a bigwig at Fox Broadcasting, and he had box seats. And so they were there and they contacted me and said, there's a shooting. People are shooting, people are running, bottles are being thrown, and we can hear bullets. And I said, stay put. Hide down in the box and stay put. And then I called their father and I said, can you get there? And I don't even remember what he said. I know that I went. And so I jumped in the car, I drove to the Oakland Coliseum, and people were leaving in droves. They were running out. There were cars that were leaving. I tried to pull my car in, I couldn't, because everybody was going. Police were all over the place and telling people, get out, get out, get out. There was no place to park on the street just before the Oakland Coliseum, so I parked behind a building across the street, ran through the crowd. So I'm pushing through thousands of people who are coming this way. I could hear bullets, I could hear glass breaking, and the police were saying, you cannot come in. You need to get out, you cannot come in. And I was like, oh no, my children are in the box seats. And he said, a couple of police kept telling me they wouldn't be because they're making everybody go. And I said, no, my children would obey me. They are in the box seat. They're on the floor in the box seat. I know it. And so I got to the building where just above me I could see people with guns and I could see people throwing bottles. And so I flew underneath the door awning and got in the door and screamed, and my children came out of the box. And I grabbed them, and then we all ran out. Now, that's like a movie. It's like, I can't imagine that I would do something like that, but there's this thing that kind of ignites you when you just need to do something, and that is what happened. And it was really funny because later my son said, you broke all the rules. So my second story is about my son. It was February. It was a President's Day weekend. And he desperately wanted to go on a date with this girl named Cassie. And he had been wanting to go on a date with her forever. Everybody wanted to date Cassie. And my son was like the nerd going to Catholic school. And so Cassie was like the prom queen, and she wouldn't look at him to save her life. And finally, she said yes to going to a movie, and he was just thrilled, wanted to go. It was the first rain, and he missed the first movie because he lost his wallet. Then he couldn't find the clothes that he was going to wear. Everything kept going wrong. And so he called her back and said, would you be willing to wait for the next movie? And she said, okay. So then he started to look for his wallet, couldn't find that. Couldn't find the keys to the car once he found the wallet. And at some point, I remember going out to him and saying, everything's going wrong. Maybe you need to just give this up. And he said, no, this is the first time she has said yes in a year and a half, I've got to go. And so he said, I just need to find one more thing. He went back into the house, I went into the house, and something went wrong in that there was a custom that we had. He would always say, bye, mommy, and I would say, bye, son, make good decisions. And I looked outside, and he'd found whatever it was that he went back for, and he was gone. And I thought, oh, wow, that's not how we ever leave. So he was supposed to go on the date, and then he was going to spend the night at his friend Marcus's house, and they were both going to go up to Chico for the rest of the weekend and hang out with some friends who went to Chico State. So days went by, but I didn't expect him because he was going to be with Marcus. However, he never made it to the movie, and he never made it to Marcus's house because he was on 101 and there was an accident on 101, and the paramedics were on the side of the road. They had just cleared that accident, but there was oil on the road, and it was a first rain, and an SUV swerved, and the headlights were facing my son, and they collided. The driver's side of the car was completely crushed, and the steering wheel ruptured his diaphragm. He stopped breathing right as the paramedics, who were still riding up the previous accident, they were still on the side of the road, got to him, and he was airlifted to San Jose Medical Center, and was on full life support. He had a dedicated nurse who was trying to find his family, but it was President's Day weekend. So they didn't have my phone number, they didn't know how to reach me, but somehow they Googled me or something, I don't know what it was, but they realized that I had a school. And so Wednesday morning, when the school opened, there was a message and the phone was ringing from the nurse at the hospital saying, "Come quickly, your son is in intensive care." I called my partner who was in San Francisco. She was head of spiritual care at Kaiser at the time. And someone from Kaiser drove her. My two daughters lived in the apartment above my school, so they were where I was, and we all drove down and met in San Jose. When we got there, the doctor said that he was probably not going to make it, and asked us if we wanted to consider removing him then from life support. He was comatose. He was hooked up from head to toe. He had glass from the windshield all around his eye, and they had done 2 brain surgeries, and so he had stitches all over the place. And I said, I can't answer you. I can't answer that because I don't know. I don't know. And it had just been the time when there was a story in the news about this woman who refused to let her daughter come off life support. I forget her name, but it was a big thing, and so much time had passed, and the news kept saying they are still holding out. And I said, I'm not trying to be like that. I just don't know. I just don't know what to do. So I just need to think it out for a little bit. And so we waited. We put headphones on him, all of his favorite music that he loved and I hated. His body started to turn inward, and I said, "Why is that happening?" And the doctor said, "Because his brain is not functioning." And so we worked his legs. I had one, my partner had the other, and we just turned his legs out, and we moved them up and down, and we just kept saying, "This is what you're supposed to do. This is how your legs are supposed to work. This is how your arms are supposed to work." And we just did that 24/7. If I gave out, she took over. If she gave out, I took over, and we just went on and on. We never left his side. We never left the hospital. We did some of the most outrageous things that we could come up with to just say, keep going. By day 10, we had still not given permission. And the doctors came in and said, you really need to make a decision. And my partner said, pull back on the respirator, pull back on his oxygen, which scared the daylights out of me. And she said, just pull back a little bit. And she started to say, breathe, breathe, breathe. And nothing happened. They put it back up. She said, do it again. And she kept saying that, do it again, do it again, do it again. And then finally, he started to breathe 2%. And then she said, give it a few hours and do it a little bit more. And they thought we were absolutely bananas. And when I think about that, I don't know what the rationale was. She doesn't know what the rationale was either. We had nothing else to do. And so we just kept leaning into his ear and breathing into his ear so that he could hear what the sound was like, because we thought maybe that would be the thing that would help. And little by little, he started to breathe. I think we got up to about 50% of him breathing on his own. And by that time, I think we were so way past wiped, or they thought we were bananas, that the nurse said, "We think you need to have a break and leave the hospital," because we had not. Or maybe we smelled, I don't know. So I leaned down into his ear and I said, "I'm leaving, but I'm not leaving you. I'm leaving because I just need to take a break and we'll be back." So there was a motel that was like across the street or around the corner, and we went there, and I was taking a shower, and I remember jumping up and down in the shower and saying, "I don't know this stuff. I don't know it. I don't know what to tell him. I don't know if I tell the doctor yes. I don't know if I tell the doctor no. I need something, anything, to give me some indication of what I should do." And in that moment, I tell you honestly, the phone rang. Phone rang, it was the nurse at the hospital, and they said, "His eyes are open." And we flew back to the hospital, got into the room, looked in, and he went. And I thought, because of what you see in the movies, I thought that meant he was going to jump up and say, "Mom, I'm here, and how are things?" It was the only movement he had. And he couldn't speak. And he was paralyzed completely on one side. And at one point, he was moving his mouth, but we didn't understand what he was saying. So then we contacted a friend who was a sign language interpreter for a church. And I said, "I need you to come to the hospital. I need you to tell me what Jonathan is saying." And he came to the hospital, and he said, "He's saying nothing." And I said, "He's got to be saying something, because he's moving his mouth. He's got to be trying to talk to us. What can you watch again?" And he said, "It's nothing. He's just moving his mouth. It's absolutely nothing." And so we started researching. And the hospital told us that the best that they were going to be able to do was to get him maybe using that same arm to operate an electric wheelchair, but that he would probably not be able to speak, and he would probably not be able to move. And at one point, one of my daughters said to me, "You've turned him into a vegetable because of your decision." And I think that she was just scared about it, and so were all of us, because we just really didn't know what to do, what we wanted. And I remember that night praying and saying, "I want back that same kid who listened to the music that I couldn't stand, who never asked me if he could help me move the groceries into the car, who would say, 'Whatever,' I'll take him. I'll take him back. If I could just have that one, just the way he was, I'll take him." And Elizabeth started to research hospitals and asked them, "Will you come and will you tell us, can you do any more than what they said that he could do?" And different hospitals started to come out, or they would just say, "There's nothing that we can do." And we ended up with a representative from Kentfield. I don't know if anyone knows Kentfield Hospital, Kentfield Rehab Hospital. They came out and they said, "We will get him to a point where he knows who he is, he knows how old he is, and that he can walk." And so we went. We had an ambulance take him to Kentfield. We stayed there 24/7. He had 8 hours of therapy every single day, 8 sets of people who came on the hour for a different therapy. And it happened day after day after day after day until he slowly started to talk. And when he could get a full sentence, he said, "I hate therapy. What will you do if I start to hate you?" And I said, "You know what? If you can walk over to me and you can tell me that you hate your therapy, I'm good. I'm good." So he got out of Kentfield. He was supposed to go to another rehab place. He didn't want to go to another hospital, so we brought him home because he wanted to be home. Except what we didn't realize was that what would have happened in the hospital is that they would have monitored how his brain functions and what his thinking was. And at the time, we lived in a 3-story Victorian, and he started climbing out of the bedroom window onto the roof of the house. And it happened continually. And even when I would say to him, this is what's happening, one, he didn't believe me. He didn't have the memory to even know that it had happened. And so it just continued to occur, to the point that I couldn't go out there anymore. Elizabeth was continuing to climb out on the roof and bring him in. I was sitting in a rocking chair outside the room rocking because I just, like, oh my God, I just don't know what to do. And finally, I looked at him and I said, because he only could remember things in real time. And so I said, I'm going to keep talking to you, and I want you to keep listening to what I'm saying, because I know that when I'm done, you're not going to hold on to it. You are climbing out of the window. You are going to end up falling out and killing yourself because you keep climbing out of the window. And he was like, I'm doing what? And I said, you are. You're climbing out of the window, and it's happening like every hour. You're climbing out of the window, and we've tried to shut the windows down, to put nails in the windows. You keep making it happen. And he said, keep talking. And so I kept explaining it. So he started to write these notes that said, you idiot, you stop doing this. And I said, don't call yourself an idiot. And he says, no, I'll know I wrote it. And so I'm going to write the way that I'm thinking at the time. And so he posted notes all over his room while I continued to talk to him. And it was the last time that he climbed out of the window, which was really wonderful. In all, Jonathan was in 13 hospitals. Every time he plateaued, we'd find another hospital. And so he went to 13 different hospitals to learn how to function better, how to improve his memory better. And he decided that he needed to go back to college. He didn't understand why he wasn't there. And so he said, why haven't I been back to school? So I went to Holy Names University, which was where he was supposed to be, and I said, he thinks that he can do this. Is there any way that we can kind of make this happen? And they thought it was crazy. I thought it was crazy, but the other variable was that what my son remembered was that when he had started at Holy Names, his sister was also there as well. At that point, his sister had moved, was getting married, and lived in Seattle. And I said, Jen, he thinks that you still live here and goes to Holy Names. She left her husband. She came down for a semester, and she followed Jonathan to class. She would walk him to class, and then she would wait outside. He was thinking that she was in class somewhere, and she would then come in at the end of his class and talk to him about what they had been talking about, because he only had real-time memory, and she'd keep the conversation going and walk him to his next class. The sisters at Holy Names would work with him to help him to have remembering skills, to find out what his assignments were, to go back over the notes that he had written that he didn't recall that he had written about his classes. And Jonathan ended up graduating with a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in cultural studies. Who was the mother? There were many. There were many. Talk about a village. And that's what we do. We just become a village for each other. And I cannot tell you how many people, when people would call up and they would say, what can we do? I would say, just pray, just pray. He had a network of people who were sending messages and who were praying and who sometimes would come in for a couple of hours to give us respite at the hospital, who were just sending him notes, who were contacting the people that he had graduated with, saying, please contact the family just to help him remember. Please send a picture of you and them so that he has something that he can remember. There was never one mother. It was never the person who gave him birth. It was always an incredible number of people who did mothering. I will never forget when my mother passed away, that it was my daughter, Brianna, who cared for her when we brought her over from her house after I had been working. I had been going back and forth from Alameda to San Francisco because my mother had foster children. So I was going, caring for her foster children, getting them off to school, going back to San Francisco, getting back to Alameda, getting my children, sending them off to school, going back to San Francisco, picking her children up from school, bringing them back, fixing my mother lunch and dinner, going back home and fixing my children lunch or dinner. And I'm forgetting, at one point I would go to my school in Alameda. One of my teachers would come to my house, stay with the foster children in the car so that I could take a shower and then come back. It was like, oh my gosh, the things that we do in being able to help people and the things that we do to mother. I'll never forget the many manifestations that mothering takes in the life of others, the courage that it takes, the impact that it takes. And in the midst of the years of war and unrest that have happened between Israel and Palestine, it's mothers across cultures, across religions, across geography, who have come together as women wage peace and women of the sun. Those are the two groups. And regardless of how you feel about who's done something wrong over there, the courage of these mothers speaks out because they've defied those statements. They've defied those beliefs. They've defied those barriers, and they've come together. And I want you to just... Where'd Jeremy go? Jeremy, can you pop up for a second? I want you to just take a moment. And if you'll close your eyes, I'm just going to read you a piece of a letter that they wrote. In the context of difficult events and significant escalation, especially during these painful days, we, Israeli and Palestinian mothers, members of the Israeli movement, Women Wage Peace, and the Palestinian movement, Women of the Sun, which was recently founded, turn to you with this message. Please initiate a dialogue as soon as possible for the purpose of ending bloodshed, stopping violence, and reaching a resolution of this long and painful conflict. We, who are anxious about the fate of our children and the future of both nations, signed a historic Partnership Pact in order to work towards a resolution of the conflict, with a commitment to work together incessantly to enlist the support of women and men from diverse communities to find a political solution to the conflict. The historic signing of the pact between the two movements took place at a ceremony at the Dead Sea in the presence of hundreds of women from both sides. We are united in our human aspiration for a future of peace, freedom, equal rights, and security for the sake of our children and future generations. We believe that the majority of both nations share this mutual aspiration. Working together is the only way to build a future of hope and mutual respect for our children. And finally, I want to read you a poem that someone gave to me about my son. That is a poem that was written for people who have children with disabilities, because I cherish the son that I have, but I also had to grieve the son that I had. He's not the same person. This says, "Welcome to Holland. I am often asked to describe the experience of raising a child with a disability, to try to help people who have not shared that unique experience to understand it, to imagine how it would feel. It's like this. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and make your wonderful plans, the Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands. The stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland, you say? What do you mean Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life, I've dreamed of going to Italy. But there's been a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So, you must go out and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language, and you must meet a whole new group of people that you've never met. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy. But after you've been there for a while and you catch your breath, you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills, and Holland has tulips, and Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about what a wonderful time they had there. And for the rest of your life, you will say, yes, maybe that was where I was supposed to go. Maybe that's what I planned. And the pain of that will never, ever, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is a very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to Italy, you may never, ever be free to enjoy the very special, the very lovely things about Holland. On this day, I'm reminded of what mothering really is and the extent to which we move in mothering, and the many people of all genders and all backgrounds and all cultures, how we care for others, and sometimes how we forget to care for ourselves. I'm reminded of how too often those involved in mothering forget to mother themselves or to accept mothering. I'm reminded that mothering holds no gender, that it holds heart, it holds courage, it holds understanding, and it requires self-love and self-care, because it teaches each of us who are engaged in this work to safeguard ourselves, to appreciate ourselves, and not to lessen our self-worth, and to recognize that each day we are co-creators with each other in a great gift of love. Happy Mothering Day. Thank you.